I spent my whole life disconnected from both of my parents, but especially my mom, rejecting them. And I want to talk about what that did for my life and how I resolved that in this video. Come on in. So hello and welcome back to my channel. Today I want to continue the conversation that I've been having about the 4 themes. I've talked about a break in the bond, I've talked about a merge, and today I'm talking about a rejection. So a break in the bond, if you remember, is a break in the maternal bond. A merge is the ways that you are living life like a parent, and a rejection is just like it sounds. It's an active rejection of your parents, of the relationship with them. In what some would call the universal laws of family constellations, the orders of love are very, very clear about the topics of rejection and exclusion, and especially around your parents. And I want to read to you a portion of Mark Wolyn's book, It Didn't Start With You, because he so eloquently outlines what it is that I'm trying to capture today in this video. So it's from page 66 and it's section 2. And the question is, have you judged, blamed, or rejected, or cut yourself off from a parent? If we truly want to embrace life and experience joy, if we truly want deep and satisfying relationships and health that's vibrant and resilient, if we truly want to live up to our full potential without the sense of being broken inside, we must first repair our broken relationship with our parents. Beyond giving us life and being an inexorable, I'll get it, part of who we are, our parents are the gateway to the hidden strengths and creative forces, as well as the challenges that are part of our ancestral legacy. Whether dead or alive, whether we're distant from them or our relationship is amicable, our parents and the traumas that they've experienced or inherited hold the key to our healing. I want to read that again. Whether they are dead or alive, whether we're distant from them or our relationship is amicable, our parents, the traumas they've experienced or inherited hold the key to our healing. Even if you have a sense that you'd rather chew a handful of thumbtacks than warm to your parents, this step cannot be bypassed, no matter how long it takes. It took me 36 weekly lunches with my Marine Sergeant father before he finally told me that he never believed that I loved him. Because broken relationships often stem from painful events in our family history and can repeat for generations until we summon the courage to let go of our judgments, our constricted hearts, and regard our parents and other family members with a light of compassion. Because only by doing so can we resolve the pain that prevents us from wholly embracing our lives. So that piece in and of itself is so powerful because it illustrates the weight of what a rejection can hold in our life. I want to give a quick trigger warning to this video because I'm going to talk about my relationship with my mom, and it will contain references to sexual abuse, to drug addiction, and to child abuse. And if you've ever experienced any of those, you might want to take caution as you watch this video, or this may not be the video for you, and that's fine too. But I want to talk about the ways that rejecting your mom can deeply affect your life. But I also want to talk about the resolution by sharing my own story and how dramatically my life shifted once I resolved my rejection to my mom. Now, I'm acutely aware that many who see this video have their own experiences with a mom who perhaps wasn't safe, or maybe who was abusive, or with whom a separation, physical separation, is necessary. I want to honor that because separation and rejection are 2 different things. A separation can be what keeps us safe, and it's your boundaries, and it's very necessary. But a rejection is a cross-the-board judgment, a rejection and a foregoing of any attempt to resolve the break in the relationship. And that's the difference that I'm talking about today. So I look at a choice to go no contact, for instance, as a boundary. Sometimes no contact also means a rejection, and sometimes it doesn't. So this is you. The choice that you made for you is right. I honor you. I see your choice. I see you. And I'm not here to tell you any different. I'm here to talk about the way that you hold mom and how that can affect your life, how you hold her internally. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, I understand the unique way that this video or this topic might be triggering for some. I also invite you to pay close attention to what is happening to your body or within your body as you listen to this. Those body sensations, they represent where the trauma lives in your body. So I invite you to listen, to know your limits, to breathe as deep as you need to when you need to. And through those moments that maybe you feel are a little heavier than others, just breathe through them. And in saying that, I want you to know you are incredibly capable of processing and resolving this body memory. So I also invite you to watch another video of mine that I made just for the topic of processing emotions through and out of your body. It's called Becoming Body Aware. I'll put a link down below so that you can get to that as well. It's a great tool for understanding the emotions as they show up in your body and what you can do to process through them. So I know how hard it can be to resolve trauma from your childhood. I know the heaviness that those subconscious ways that we learn to cope, I know the heaviness of how they live in your body. And I also know the heaviness of what it feels like to spend my whole life disconnected from my parents, rejecting them. And so this particular topic is especially close to me. So even though on the surface of my life, everything looked fine, I had significant relationship issues, deep issues with parenting my children. I was constantly feeling rejected and out of place, and I was always searching for meaning and connection. Of course, I didn't know what it was then. I was just living my life the only way that I knew how. It was normal to me. I also spent my life encountering the very things for which I rejected my parents. They just showed up in other people. They showed up in my relationships. They showed up in my jobs. They showed up in my friendships. They showed up in my parenting. And so the first constellation that I did when I entered this work was around the rejection of my mom, and that was tough. So constellations take the internal story, the story that you've held, and it brings it out so that you can have a physical experience to process and find a resolution for this issue. So the exercise was for me to set up footprints, like footprint cutouts of my mom that represented her. And I had to place them in proximity to me that felt comfortable, where I felt comfortable with her in that space, right? So I visualized that those footprints represented my mom, and I had to place her in proximity to me in the space that I felt comfortable. I tried to visualize her in the same room as me, and I wanted to jump out of my skin. My body was on fire, like it just was not okay. And so I placed her in another room, far away from me, until I felt safe. And so the ways that even thinking about your mom being in proximity to you, what that does to your body tells you a lot about how that relationship is held for you. Even if you have a good relationship with your mom, if you think about her being close to you, what does that bring up in your body? Do you feel suffocated? Do you feel angry? Do you feel like you have enough space to expand, like there's enough space for both of you in the room? That exercise was so powerful. For me, it represented not being safe and not being protected from harm. And so I wanted her as far away from me as I possibly could. And it accurately represented how our relationship was for my whole life. So I placed her in the other room where I could feel safe, where I could control what was going on, right? Because that is what I learned as a child, that I was in charge of my safety and that I had to control that. And gosh, what a heavy lesson for a child to have to carry. That's a heavy one, right? Have you had to carry that? Have you had to feel like you are in charge of your safety? It's understandable that this exercise that I'm explaining may also be hard for you. So in that other room, that really was the closest that I could bear for her to be with me. And that was tough. But as I worked through my family map, as I understood the facts of my family, as I understood what was happening in my body, I also understood where she came from, where my grandma came from, and the stories that laid within the field of my family, or as I like to call it, and many of my colleagues like to call it, the family soul. So when I saw all of that, I did start to soften a little bit at a time to the possibility that I could resolve this rejection of my mom. Because at our core, if we have a choice, we don't want to carry these rejections of mom. We just don't. If we can get past the hurt, if we can get past the fear and the necessary walls that we've built, deep down, we do want to resolve it. And there will just come a time when you're tired of the fight, when you can see how pinned up you are, how tense you are, how angry you are, how disconnected, frustrated, and unsatisfied you are. Or the range of other survival mechanisms that have had to work for you, right? They're not working anymore for you. When you get to that place, maybe you can soften to the idea that perhaps resolving the rejection of your mom is possible. And maybe at the heart of it all, you may not have the words or the conscious understanding, but you just know that something has to change. You can't exist in this space anymore. And you might even notice that you're pulled to mom even in small ways, even if you've never admitted to anybody or even admitted to yourself. Maybe you think about her more. Maybe there is just this tiny little pull to that resolve. Now, my mom, she passed away in 2001, and yet here I was 18 years later, still holding on to that defensive stance, right? And I can't know if she was alive now, what that external relationship would look like. But the beauty of this work is that I can still find a resolution. Even if it's not safe for you to be around your parent, you can find a resolution, even if they've transitioned from life. Because this is about how you resolve and integrate your own healing, regardless of whether or not mom can reconcile hers. If you can reconcile with her and build a different relationship, that is amazing. I encourage that, and we can talk about how that can happen. But if that's not possible, that's okay also. Because this work, this is about changing your internal image of her. It's about accepting who she is, or it's about releasing the expectation that you hold for her. And it's about processing the body memory of that, the body memory that acts as a shield and a reflector to her. And then reparenting that inner little girl in the ways that you need it, even if you never have another conversation with her, whether she owns her part or not, whether she sees you or not, whether she acknowledges your healing or not. Because this shift from rejection to acceptance of what is, of the facts, it reinforces your life force. It connects you to the strength of your ancestors. It plugs you back into a family that honestly is probably waiting for you to rejoin them. But your parents are that plug. And you may have a relationship with grandmother and grandfather and aunties and uncles, but your parents are the plug to that life force. They just are. And so we have to find a resolve and what that means for us. And that looks different for everybody. I rejected both of my parents my whole life. After a while, I learned how to cope, right? I built a family, as dysfunctional and problematic as we were. I had lucked up and I found a really great partner for most of my life. I had a career that I loved. And on the surface, I started to have a good life. But I was a control freak and I was codependent. And I felt out of place everywhere I was, like I never belonged. I never felt good enough. And I always felt like I was in trouble all the time. Like my boss would want to have a conversation with me and I'd walk in there like, oh God, what did I do? Why am I in trouble? That's a trauma response. That is you carrying childhood trauma. What's for me? I was always waiting for the shoe to drop, right? And what do you think happened? I got everything that I was waiting for. Until I married my wife, my relationships mirrored the relationship with my mom in some way. Every single one picked out a different part of our relationship and it mirrored. So everything that I rejected my mom for, I found in partners. I remember I had a therapist tell me that one time. She's like, you date women like your mom. And I didn't know how to respond to that. That was maybe 13, 14 years ago. And that stuck with me. But the second that I allowed myself to soften, to visualize what healing could look like, to visualize the resolution to this rejection, and allow my parents closer to me, an inch at a time, so that they can stand behind me in their rightful place, supporting me, I felt like I was whole for the first time. And it's hard to describe. You just kind of have to experience that. I visualized my mom on one side and my dad on the other, and I felt like a little girl who was complete. And that was transformational. That was life-changing. But it took me a while to get there. It took me a while to work on my end to find that resolution, to the trauma that I held in my body, to the reasons that it was on fire when I visualized my mom standing next to me. It took me a while to feel safe with her. I took small steps that allowed her to internally be close to me, but it shifted my life. I stood taller, I stood bolder. I lived with less fear and less rejection because I constantly felt rejected from my parents. I felt rejected everywhere that I was. I constantly felt like I never belonged anywhere. And I finally felt the confidence to stand in the space that I was in, to take up space wherever I was, and that I belonged wherever I was. And I know that it was all because I felt reconnected to this ancestral lifeline that can only flow from my parents to me. I created a new story to hold within, one that considered my family system, that embraced all that was and all that is. And I took responsibility for healing myself and my legacy. So here's the beautiful thing about creating this new story. One that transforms rejection into acceptance. If you are in complete control of that new story, then neuroplasticity is working on your side. It's the ability to create new neural pathways, to end the neural patterns that keep that story alive within you. So you get to create new patterns, new habits, because our brains don't know if the thing that's happening or the story that we're telling ourselves is happening now or if it was happening back then. And so through this creation of a new story, based on the whole picture of your family, your mom, her story, your grandma, her story, you get to hit that reset button on how that story lives within you. You get to reset this relationship in a more healing, a more affirmative way, one that honors you, one that honors where you're going, one that honors your healing. So how do you do this? So you do it slowly, in a pace that honors you, one that feels safe. And from the perspective of the work that I do, we look at the facts of your family, right? We connect the dots from your current issues to where they live in the family story, where they originate. And we know that we have made a connection to that story, like we've connected those dots when you feel that story in your body, because your body holds that story. It holds the story of you, your mom, your grandma, your ancestors. It holds all of it. And we move then that story out of your body through constellation, where we can facilitate healing conversations to start to change that story, to start to create a new one. And then slowly you integrate that new story into your reality in the ways that connect with your inner child, in the ways that you notice the shifts within the way that you respond to mom. Maybe you notice that you're not triggered by her in some of the same ways that you were before. I have many clients that report after this work, mom almost instinctively knows that there's a new story and a new boundary, and so she just acts different. She responds differently. We work within boundaries and what they can look like for you, both in theory and in practice. And so we come up with rituals that allow mom in new and different ways, even if this is only about how she lives internally. Because if that's how you need it to be, that's enough, and we can work on that. You get to decide. So that's it. That is a rejection. That is how it can affect your life. That is also how you can resolve it, and how you can internally transform a rejection of mom into a brand new story of her. So if something here today is pulling you to look at this a little bit deeper, please reach out to me. All of my links are below. I have a no-cost consultation that you can book. And together we can look at what's going on and find a resolution for you. Come back next week when I wrap up this series by talking about the final of the 4 themes. It's called an identification. Now, this theme diverts a little bit away from mom and dad and looks at how you might identify with another member of your family who maybe has been rejected or maybe who's been excluded from the family story, and the ways that their fate will always find a way back in. So thanks for spending time with me. I know you have lots of choices, and I so appreciate you being here with me today. Thank you. Bye-bye.